the great state of Maryland. Surely you meant to. Let's see. But I want to start with you, Mr. Greenblatt. We are now in an election year, and I know that ADL makes a point, as you just observed a few moments ago, of calling out anti-Semitism when you see it and not allowing it to become part of the fabric of everyday existence. And I remember clearly in 2016 when ADL blew the whistle on Donald Trump's closing TV ad in the 2016 campaign, which had focused on George Soros, Lloyd Blankfein, and Janet Yellen, and said, essentially, these people are globalists who are exploiting the American people. And I'm wondering, do you take special precautions in election years to try to contact campaigns or political parties to talk about the use of anti-Semitic tropes and themes, or what do you do to make sure that we're not going to see that further kind of degradation of our political discourse?
So, Congressman, I think it's a very good question. So we're a 501c3 organization, and as a tax-exempt organization, we don't get involved in politics. I don't really care how any of you vote. I care what you value. Right? I don't care kind of what lever you pull. I care whether or not you push prejudice. So indeed, in 2016, we called out candidates when they said things that were beyond the pale. And when you make claims that there's, again, a global conspiracy and you point the finger at only Jews as driving that, forgive me, but that gets our attention. No matter who's saying it, and no matter what the consequences are of speaking out. That being said, indeed, I worry as we move into this political cycle, we have candidates on both sides of the aisle. We have both political parties who've engaged, or certain members have, with a kind of rhetoric that I think doesn't belong in our political conversation. So we do take great pains to be even-handed. We will call it when we see it. And I think, for me, that's a good way to conclude, because what gives me great hope today is after Charlottesville, you had members of Congress, you had members of the Senate, you had governors on both sides who called this out clearly and consistently. And over the last year and a half, from the mayor of Pittsburgh to the governor of New York, to many of you members of the New York delegation and relative to the attacks we've seen the last few months, you have called this out clearly and consistently. As the grandson of a Holocaust survivor who lost his entire family in Nazi Germany, when the government was, attempted to murder all of European Jewry. As the husband of a political refugee from the Middle East, a government from Iran, a government that is the worst state sponsor of anti-Semitism in the world, that has instrumentalized it as the chief plank of its foreign policy. I can tell you it makes a difference when people in positions of authority speak out, and I applaud all of you for doing just that.
Thank you. And Mr. Diamond, if I'm not mistaken, you're still my constituent? This is wonderful to hear. A lot of my constituents are terrified by the rise in anti-Semitic violence, and especially parents of small kids, especially if they go to Jewish schools and so on. And I know that this is something that's of great concern in the Orthodox community. What special precautions are being taken now, and what more do you think the government can be doing to enhance people's sense of security against the resurgence in anti-Semitic terror and violence?
Thank you for your question. My congressman, just to be fair, I should say, my sister lives in Ms. Rice's district and my parents live in Mr. King's district. In terms of precautions, there are a range of precautions that my organization, as the umbrella for synagogues around the country, are undertaking. They range from assisting our congregations with becoming educated on and applying for the grants for security improvements that are available both from the federal government and from state and local governments. We also have been working with local congregations in terms of developing best practices for training the congregants of what to do in should there be an unfortunate and emergency situation. Many of our congregations have volunteers who are standing outside synagogues and have been trained on how to be watchful in sort of a see something, say something kind of context. And so That's what we're doing in terms of our congregational life. As I said earlier, there's a lot of anxiety around this, but I don't think we're going to cower in fear. We are a resilient community, and perhaps because, sadly, there have been centuries of anti-Semitism, we have the resiliency and the courage to work with people of goodwill and government leaders who care to try to push this back and say, no, we're not going to be fearful. We're going to exercise our freedom of religion in this country.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Raskin, thank you very much.